Okay, hello, CINEFILES fans. This is our latest edition of the CINEFILES slash Unfinished Business. And today we are going to talk about the legendary John Singleton and his interesting filmography. Yeah, so I mean, when was the first time you heard about John Singleton?
I think I first heard about John Singleton when BOYZ in the Hood was coming out. And, there was this whole thing, like fresh out of film school, he makes this debut film that's like taking, that's tackling so many powerful issues and, it's making a ruckus. And then, the movie comes out. It's this, I'm not going to say it's a big hit. It wasn't like Thor numbers, but, it sold enough to get him noticed and be considered a hit. And I will admit I saw the preview in theaters, but I never went to see the movie in theaters. I saw it on home video.
Yeah, I remember when it had come out, and I was pretty damn young at that time. I was like big into T2, and the second Bill and Ted movie had come out that summer. And yeah, of all things.
I'm like, wow, counter marketing.
But I do remember like the soundtrack playing all the time. I remember all the ads. Especially when Singleton got nominated for the Oscars, like the youngest director, period, to be ever nominated. And I didn't actually see the movie for another like 5 or 6 years.
Damn.
Yeah.
So its reputation preceded it.
Pretty much, and but when I did see it, yeah, it definitely had an impact on me.
Oh, did it live up to, I guess, what you had built up in your head?
I think so. This was something that was sort of fresh and different at that time. There had been films about living in South Central LA, but it would be movies like, say, Colors, where you're focusing on the LAPD and the Bloods and the Crips, but not so much the people living in the ghettos, or, living in South Central, who, you either go the right way or you end up having your life pretty much go into a darker direction. So I think that, for a guy that came out of USC who was like dead set on making a film about his upbringing, and even just, I kind of relate in terms of like going through the business of starting out doing like internships like on Pee-wee's Playhouse, and also Arsenio Hall show, and then just building up his connections from there. That was sort of like all that coming together into a movie that would not only become a big hit, but just, I think, an iconic picture in Hollywood cinema.
Well, I liked it that it is his first film, and in my opinion, his best film. It's a great debut. A lot of great actors. Lawrence Fishburne was kind of known, but this kind of pushed him to another level of an early performance by Angela Bassett. Nia Long, Ice Cube's first real acting role.
Yeah, everybody was in it. Chestnut, of course, Cuba Gooding Jr., Regina King was in it.
Oh, yes, I see. And she continued to be in all of his films. Well, not all of them, but, his future films was usually cast in them. I'm not trying to insult the picture, but there is just one scene in particular that, to this day, I understand what they were going for in the scene, but when you watch it, it's kind of a little funny. And it's when after, Cuba Gooding Jr.'s been pulled over by the racist cop, black racist cop, and he comes, I guess he goes home or goes over Nia Long's house, and he's describing, like how it felt, and then all of a sudden he's shadow boxing and crying at the same time. I understand what was meant for the scene, but it just unfortunately a little, I guess, depending on your mood when you watch it, it can come off, you get what they're meant with the scene, or it doesn't. And it's probably no insult to him as an actor, but probably one of Cuba Gooding Jr.'s best performances, because I don't think he's ever really been challenged dramatically like that since. He's had his dramas, or he's played in dramas, but this one was where, he created a character, you're watching him grow up, but you're also seeing the emotional complexities that he has to go through.
Yeah, he, I would honestly say, like, Lawrence Fishburne had the biggest impression on me, because up until that point, when you talk about films about black fathers, they tend to always be like the deadbeat dad, unless it's like something on TV like The Cosby Show, the fictional great dad. But he was like the realistic, I was in the Army, I have my shit together, and I'm going to make sure I raise my kid right, and I'm going to discipline him to death because I don't want him falling into the trap like Ice Cube, who has no father, and his mother is sort of very passive with her life, so he's kind of going off in the wrong directions, while his brother seems to be the one with the future. But then he starts to kind of slip up a little bit before, his ultimate demise. So it's like a nice clash of, trying to raise your kid in the in the wrong environment, but trying to raise him the right way versus, the Cube character, who everybody seemed to look up to a little bit more because of his toughness.
Yeah.
But, ultimately that only gets him so far with the things that ultimately happen to him.
Yeah, and I find it interesting that, years later they came out with Menace to Society, another good film. That was a little more gritty and about characters who were more in the life.
Yeah, far more aggressive.
Yeah, this one was more, there was one, Ice Cube's character's more in the life, but everybody else is just living around it. And, I mean, one of the most powerful scenes is you already get the thing that the mother favors, Ricky. Right. And then, unfortunately, when Ricky meets his demise, spoilers, she's all more, obviously she's going to be emotional, but she blames Ice Cube for it, when really, he didn't really have anything to do with it in part this time. And, and she's slapping him and won't even let him touch the body. And then one of the other powerful scenes that I've only recently been able to make out is when she gets his SAT scores, and they're very low. Right. So it was I don't even think he would have had the scores to go to college. And so I think that maybe he knew that himself, which was why he was thinking of maybe joining the Army instead. And also I feel like Ricky wanted to do well, but I also think he wanted an escape, and that was what the Army was. He could take care of his kid and I guess his girlfriend, right, but also kind of be away from them too, because this was during more peaceful times.
Right, and then there was that clash there with Cuba's character where he's like, no, you'll just be part of the system.
Yeah, but that was, his big reckoning, John Singleton's big reckoning in Hollywood. And then he chose, I think, a follow-up project that I think he chose to show more of his sensitive side. And it goes by the name of Poetic Justice, where it was infamously Janet Jackson and a young up-and-coming rapper by the name of Tupac Shakur. Yeah. Now, this again, unfortunately, was not a movie I saw in theaters. This was something I saw on home video, but I read all the reviews of it because I really did want to see it at the time. But, okay, my recollection of Poetic Justice is definitely a more sensitive film. And I think it does deal with young characters and, looking for romance and the hardships they've gone through. But it also, I think it's supposed to be a road trip movie, but it kind of also, you keep wondering, what is the point here? Are you trying to show a black romance in the modern day? Is there a sense of ending to what this is all supposed to mean? Because infamously, all the poetry was done by Maya Angelou, who also cameos in the film. And at, I believe, a family reunion scene, also, sort of like what Tyler Perry does badly, has the older characters comment on the younger characters and the issues they're facing, but it doesn't seem like she's preaching as much as pointing it out. And this film, it's a mixed bag because it seems like it's the first time I think where I understood when you're filmmaking, there are scenes that you're writing more for audiences to be like, yeah, what? Yeah, I agree with that. But then there's also the scenes where you want to make or show depth. Because, obviously there's a contrast between Joe Torre's character and Tupac Shakur's character. Whereas, Joe Torre seems like, Mr. Smooth has it all together. But, later in the film reacts violently when his manhood is threatened by a woman. And then you have Tupac, who seems to be like this ex-criminal, all this, and, his baby's mama is, living with Tone Loc as a gangsta, and he has a daughter with her. And then to this day, I don't understand why she's also having oral sex with a man in another bedroom. So I was just like, okay, I don't know what's going on there, but let's just say the home life is messed up. But I thought, consider it, the movie is kind of like Tupac himself. it's not hypocritical, but it's soulful, but it also seems to want to put on a sheen on itself. I don't know what your thoughts are on it.
Yeah, that was, I saw that movie very late. I mean, I just kind of felt, yeah, he was trying to make a more sensitive Boys in the Hood type movie, but from the female perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought Janet Jackson was fine. I mean, of course she's fine, but I mean, just
Mm-hmm.
acting-wise, she was fine. And Tupac was definitely like sort of playing against type, being a little bit more sensitive, but still having that edge about himself. But I kind of felt like it was more of a road trip movie than anything else. I definitely felt like it was sort of like, okay, this girl who's been long grieving over her boyfriend's murder, and Tupac being the unlikely guy that she finds a connection with, but it takes a while for them to get together. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not Singleton's best film, but probably more thoughtful in some ways.
Well, it also seems like it's more of a social movie, too.
Yeah.
Because, you have the hairdressers and the revelation later that one might have AIDS or was waiting a call on his physical. Then you have, like, Tyra Farrell coming back into the film as a different character, obviously. But she's giving her philosophy to Janet Jackson. And even the thing that is just weird, I don't know if this was more of a reflection for him to show his film geekism, but when the film starts out, it has a movie within a movie at a drive-in starring Lori Petty and Billy Zane that is just over-the-top ridiculous. But I feel like that was his way of showing, like, yeah, I want to deal with social issues, but understand I'm a film geek too. So I want to like make this ridiculous B-movie movie within a movie. I intentionally chose to wait for this film, even though it comes after Poetic Justice. And if you look at it in a certain sense, since it is set in college, higher learning, this is kind of where he's graduating from maybe more of the personal stories to more of the Hollywood stories. Higher Learning is an ensemble film set at a fictional California college, which has a cross-section of students played by Christy Swanson, Jennifer Connelly, Omar Epps, Tyra Banks, Regina King, and the infamous Busta Rhymes. So, okay, those white supremacists come back again.
Michael Rappaport.
Yes, who is Remy, the character who is like a farm boy from Wisconsin, comes to college, doesn't fit in, and then finally finds a group to fit in with, and they just so happen to be white supremacists, which kind of goes with modern day. In the 90s, it might have seemed a little more far-fetched. Now it'd be like, why not? These are not only white supremacists, neo-Nazi white supremacists with the shaved heads. This film is more of a mishmash. Again, it's him doing social issues, and I can kind of understand where he's going. This also weirdly feels like his first one where he's really trying to cross over to another audience, though. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it just doesn't mix when he's making heavy points over here in the black storyline, and then he kind of gets wishy-washy when it comes to like more the white storylines. And I mean, Omar Epps is really good in it, as a track star. Lawrence Fishburne has, a Caribbean accent. Why not? And I guess it's supposed to be the voice of reason. And this film has like a message that he's obviously trying to put out with unlearn, So I understood that, but I mean, Cole Hauser is good as the lead white supremacist, but it's really, like I said, that storyline is just okay. It's dramatic. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it does show like the prejudices on campus, how like soon as they want, which I think kind of mirror today, whereas like when they're breaking up a black party, they're ready, guns drawn, but when it's like the white kids like, okay, you guys stop that. Or even at the end when Remy, spoiler, has gone on his shooting rampage, they're holding him at gunpoint, but they're trying to talk him down, like, put down the gun, it'll be okay, blah, blah, blah.
And meanwhile, Omar Epps is being handcuffed.
Exactly, and it's like, and how is he supposed to, really go on at the school? But I mean, for all of this, it's a film that starts off as a social drama that becomes strangely, I would say, a thriller towards the end.
Somewhat. I mean, I personally enjoyed a film
Okay.
just from an entertainment standpoint.
I think that's the only way you can.
Yeah, I think the performances are fine. I think Singleton's direction was good, and it had an interesting kind of soundtrack where you had the hip hop side of it, but then you had like the grungy type of music, like Tori Amos was hot at the time, and whoever else was around that they had on like the other side of the soundtrack. But also, when I do think back about that movie, I feel like it's not fully complete.
It's not, because there's a lot of questions like I have just from watching it. Like, okay, this film is supposed to dispel like certain stereotypes, certain characters. Why does the Adam Goldberg character fit completely into every Jewish cliche you can conceive of? The love scene with Christy Swanson, I think by the end it is her having a love scene with I forget the other actor's name, but you know, a male, but she's fantasizing about Jennifer Connelly. But when I saw it in a theater, I wasn't sure which one is she actually, you know, having the love scene with.
Right.
So that was a little confusing. And again, like at the end, you have this unlearned message. We know he's going to keep continuing running track at the college, but it's like, but really you don't. And I guess he makes peace with Christy Swanson's character, who clutched her purse early in the beginning of the film when they first met. But it's like, for instance, Regina King kind of disappears halfway into the movie as her roommate. I mean, I know she wasn't a major character, but, you know, you set up this time to set her up, you know, like when Christy Swanson's date rapist calls her a black bitch. And, you know, then the only reason Ice Cube and his crew go and beat the guy up is because of that, not the whole, oh, he might have raped this girl. It's like, no, he called you a black bitch. And then he actually went even bigger with his next film, with a movie that unfortunately bombed really not really bad, but it didn't make as much money as
setback.
Yeah, and that is Rosewood. This is more of an epic tale, you know, of the town of Rosewood, which unfortunately was burned to the ground when a white woman accused a black man of raping her, when actually it was she was having an affair with another white man, and he beat her, but she needed something to explain to her husband, and the town folk just gleefully went along and basically murdered and burned down the town. Now, this one I did see in theaters. And I even remember the trailer. But this is where I don't blame John Singleton for this. I blame more the studio. They kind of made it seem like a revenge Western type film when I saw the trailer. Because I remember, like, you know, all the black characters being treated bad, but having their own, you know, town. And then you know, Ving Rhames as the Drifter comes in, and, you know, they start murdering black people, and then all of a sudden, you know, we're used to seeing black people just run and, you know, hide from. He was the only character who was standing up to them and blew them away. And okay, this film, I think it showed he could do epic movies. This was also one of the first films where I really started noticing Don Cheadle as an actor, because even though Ving Rhames is the Drifter hero, I would say Don Cheadle is the toughest character in the movie, because he already was taking no nonsense, and he's actually a citizen of the town. The big star, I guess, white star of this film, you could say, is Jon Voight, who is... He doesn't murder anybody, but he's kind of complicit as he's sleeping with an underage black girl who works at his shop. And he seems to be, I guess, the Oscar Schindler here, where he's trying to help people escape, but also, you know, like, oh yeah, they went that way when they really went that way. And it's a mixed feeling because it's basically an African-American all-star cast. You have Esther Roll. I mean, and on the white side, you have Michael Rooker as the main, like, antagonist who wants, let's just kill them all, burn them all. And this is one of those movies where it's a history lesson in of itself, obviously dramatized, but the problem, I guess, that I could see maybe, again, with African-American audiences going to see this in films is the same reason that African-American audiences have problem watching depictions of slavery. We kind of feel embarrassed or don't really want to pay our money for a history that we already know, and then to see it depicted on screen. I mean, at least here there are some heroic scenes for, you know, black characters and black actors. But again, we're watching like most of this town get burned down and people just murdered, trampled, killed, hung. So that is kind of hard to see. And I mean, come on, they kill Florida Evans in the movie. Esther Roll, spoilers. So, you know, but I think it was an achievement for him artistically, but I think it kind of only hurt him more in the business sense because, again, since it didn't make any money and it doesn't really have crossover appeal, considering other than Jon Voight, every other character is dyed-in-the-wool racist and evil, and the only scene of comeuppance for the woman who accused this and started this is that the husband finally finds out the truth and just, I guess, basically off-screen beats her, which, you know, in the film makes, you know, sense and it's kind of heroic, but, you know, if you're going to go into feminism and everything, no, not the great thing, but I think even women would understand, you know, the reason for that scene. And what did you think of Rosewood? Or how did you come to it?
I've seen it. There's really not much I could say about it. It's just, it was a long film, and
well, epic.
No, it was well shot. It was well acted, but yeah, I mean, it's just it was hard to kind of concentrate sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a film, I'll admit, it's not something I watch over and over, but it is a film, you know, I'll watch every few years. I mean, I give John Singleton credit because he's the first filmmaker, a Hollywood filmmaker, who actually went out there and made a film of this scope and on, you know, this kind of, you know, kind of subject. First of all, from a black director standpoint, you know, and this is years before 12 Years a Slave. This is even before Amistad even came out. So, you know, I give him credit for that film. And I think, obviously, to me, it's an achievement over Poetic Justice, but it also shows him developing as a director.
And then, you know, the complaints about the bald head and the goatee, and he looked too much like Hawk from Spencer for Hire. I mean, it was 2000. He wasn't going to have an afro.